session now. I hope everyone is in great condition so that we can enjoy and at the same time get the maximal benefits from this session. Before we start our session, I would like to remind everyone, first, you may switch on your camera, but please mute your microphone to prevent any interruption during the session. Second, question and answer session will be open after the speaker have finished with his sharing. So if you have any question to the speaker, please leave them in the chat box and we will ask them for you later, or you may personally ask them during the Q&A later. Also, before we begin today's session, let's take a moment of silence for prayers. Assalamualaikum and good afternoon again to all the attendees of our special session today entitled Law of the Sea on Border Issues. I am Sharifah Nur Nazifah binti Muhammad Azmi from the Faculty of Sharia and Law on behalf of the International Law Unit USIM with collaboration of Universitas Gadjah Mada will be your MC today. First and foremost, I would like to welcome our honorable speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Hazmi bin Mohd Rusli, the Senior Lecturer at the Faculty of Sharia and Law, Universiti, Sains Islam Malaysia, USIM. Not forgetting all professors, lecturers, students, and audiences across countries. Welcome to our session, Law of the Sea on Border Issues. Before we start off with our session, let me introduce briefly to all of you our incredible and honorable speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Hazmi bin Mohd Rusli. For your information, his areas of specialization include Law of the Sea and Public International Law. He is a visiting professor at a number of universities all over the world, namely School of Law, Far Eastern Federal University, Vladivostok, Russia, Vladivostok State University of Economics and Service, and few more. He was also attached as research associate in a number of institutions such as the Australian National Centre for Ocean Resources and Security, University of Wollongong, Australia, and few more. What is more, our speaker has been invited to speak as a keynote and plenary speaker at conferences around the world. He has authored a number of articles that have been published in high-impact journals and popular magazines and newspapers. And he has been interviewed by a number of renowned international and local media outlets on international law-related topics. Also, he is currently the Lieutenant Commander of the Royal Malaysian Navy Volunteer Reserve Team. Thus, I bet everyone can wait to know more about our topic today on the law of the sea on border issue. Hence, I will pass the floor to our speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Hazmi bin Mohd Rusli, to proceed with the session. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Miss Chairperson Sharifah Nazifah, who has always been there every time we organize any webinars. So we really appreciate your effort in supporting our cause to disseminate knowledge and also to share wisdom and experience. So before I move forward, I would like to congratulate fellow Malaysians for receiving a new Prime Minister today. This has been the third time since we changed Prime Minister since 2018. So I really hope after this we won't have to change Prime Minister anymore. So I watched the ceremony at 2:30 just now, and we have a new Prime Minister. Hopefully this this new Prime Minister will bring more stability not only for Malaysia but for ASEAN as a whole. Okay, let me share screen. Okay, today, if you could remember yesterday, we we listened to presentation by Professor Clive Schofield. He was one of the professors when I was doing my PhD at the Australian National Centre for Ocean Resources and Security at the University of Wollongong. He was there when I was doing my PhD, but he was not the one who supervised me because his area is more on border issues. To be honest, my area is actually on environmental law. But I guess for environmental law, I need more than just 2 hours to share what I have. So I decide to present to you a more interesting, it's equally interesting, but this is more a contentious issue because it involves the issue of sovereignty. If you remember, Professor Clive Schofield mentioned yesterday that whenever you mention borders, you are referring to sovereignty. So for today, for the next 1.5 hours or so, my presentation would be on Law of the Sea Convention 1982 and how it impacted the maritime boundaries in Southeast Asia, particularly among Malaysia's immediate neighbors like Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, China, not really an immediate neighbor, but yeah, with the drawing of 9-dash line, it actually put Malaysia into the picture there. But Malaysia has not in any way recognized the 9-dash line as propagated as claimed by China. And before I move forward, I would like to thank Universiti Gadjah Mada for a great collaboration with our own international law unit from USIM, where we have now moved to the second presentation for ACL Dream. So look forward for the next 1 month of beautiful collaboration. And thank you so much for to Sharifa, Nazifa for the generous introduction. But let me just share with you what I have prepared here. I'm not really a military personnel. I'm actually honorary lieutenant commander at the with the Royal Malaysian Navy Volunteer Reserve. This is so fascinating because people think that if we want to contribute to the nation in conjunction with Malaysia's and Indonesia's Independence Day, people usually think that if we want to contribute to the nation, we have to go and carry out weapons and fight our enemies. But that's not entirely true. I contributed through my writings and contribute to the knowledge. And the Royal Malaysian Navy decided to award me with the title of Lieutenant Commander with the Royal Malaysian Navy. Let me show you the picture here. It's this one. Just to motivate everyone, if you are really into academic world, please do so. Please do it with passion, because you will be rewarded. One way or another, you will be rewarded. And the one on the left is the Chief Navy of the Royal Malaysian Navy, and the one on the right is the Lieutenant Commander in my home, i.e. my mother. So she attended during the award. And let me share with you other photos which is quite relevant. This is me and my supervisor when I obtained my PhD in 2012. And me and my students when I was teaching in Vladivostok. I was supposed to go there last year, but because of the pandemic, then we can't really move anywhere. I really miss the snow there. It's really thick and the temperature could go down to -20. But like it or not, I would prefer tropical weather. And this is me with the Malaysian flag, the city of Vladivostok, and some newspaper cuttings about myself a couple of years ago. And actually, before I move forward, I just want to tell you what ACL Dream is all about. It originated from this course, which we name it as International Law Course. We have collaborations with an Indonesian organization called Good Luck ID, the one on the right over here. And this has been organized since 2016. But before the pandemic, we invite them to come to KL. And as you can see here, these are participants from mainly from Indonesia, and also from the Philippines as well. from Thailand. We also had participants from Thailand, from Thailand and Brunei, if I'm not mistaken. And these were among the activities that we used to have. After class, we will all go into KL for sightseeing and also to have amazing race. So please pray hard that this pandemic will go away soon. And let me skip this. All right. Okay. And let's say if you would be able to come to KL next year, I will bring you to me and my committee members will bring you to, I know everyone knows this, Petronas Towers, the River of Life, Blue Pond, and Bukit Bintang, our premier shopping center, riding the public transportation. And this is our main train station, KL Central. Let me show you what happened to this place, to these places now. Okay, this is the current photo of our main train station in KL, deserted because of the pandemic, and it has been like this for the past 8 months. The vaccination rate, because about almost 40% of Malaysians have been fully vaccinated, and this is Petronas Twin Towers, the mall inside it, and this was taken at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. You can see it's totally deserted. And this is Bukit Bintang before the pandemic. And this is how it looked like now, every night, almost every night. So it's really sad. It's what's happening, not only in Malaysia, but the rest of the world. And over the weekends, this is the photo on the left shows Malaysian crossing, Singaporeans, really, really heavy before the pandemic hits us, and now look at what happened. It's totally deserted. Even as an immediate neighbor, Malaysians cannot visit Singapore without any proper reasons or documentation. So yeah, this is what is happening now. In conjunction with what we can say about reimagining borders. AirAsia, Malindo Air, Lion Air, Scoot, Cebu Pacific, we can now visit each other much easier. The price tickets are going lower. I can just book my ticket and go to Jakarta later in the afternoon if I wanted to in the past. But now borders has been closed because of the pandemic. Okay, so I'm not talking about COVID or the pandemic. I would like to talk about the real maritime boundary that we have between our neighbors. And in this first photo, the maritime boundary, this is the city of Johor Bahru, Malaysia, and the one behind is Singapore. And the maritime boundary of Malaysia and Singapore is somewhere over here, somewhere here. Okay, so it has been decided in a treaty signed in 1995 between the two nations, and it has been like that ever since. Even though reclamation works are taking place in the Strait of Johor, right? So if COVID-19 goes away soon next year, Malaysia welcomes you, and Indonesia also welcomes you. Okay, so let us visit each other once the pandemic ends, right? So if you want to talk about law of the sea and maritime boundaries and whatnot, we cannot run away from looking at history. From the presentation that I saw this morning by Prof. Rahmat and the one by Prof. Schofield, they do not really delve into historical perspective on how maritime boundary developed. So I would like to venture into that now, and then later on come up with what has happened today with regards to the ongoing overlapping maritime disputes between nations, right? So I watched a movie last night by an Indonesian movie by the name of Sultan Agong. He was the king of the Kingdom of Mataram. And in that movie, it portrayed that he was trying so hard to fight against Dutch colonial masters because he did not want his country to be colonized. Okay, that is one of the examples showing that this region, the Malay archipelago, the Indonesian archipelago, or Southeast Asia in general, used to have their own civilization, their own maritime civilization and the way they conduct themselves at sea. Okay, how they govern the sea in a way. So among the first kingdom to be established, among the earliest ones, the notable ones would be the Kingdom of Srivijaya from 7th to 13th century. The realms are really, really huge, all from Thailand all the way down to Indonesia. And during this time, we can say that the local population at that time, the Malays, Javanese, the Thais, or the Filipinos, they actually, when they sail through the sea, they are actually exercising customary practices on that governs their navigation from one place to the other. For instance, during the Kingdom of Srivijaya, they sent envoys to China, according to historical accounts. They also sent envoys to India. So how did they do this? They actually navigate through the sea. And even though they do not really have a written code on how they should sail the seas, through their customary practices, we can conclude that the local Asians, the local Southeast Asians at that time, like I said, the Malays, the Thais, the Siamese, the Javanese, and other ethnic groups of Southeast Asia have their own code of conduct when they navigate in the sea. Particularly through customary practices of ocean governance, right? And because of this, there are many traders coming to these local kingdoms and trade with them. For example, Arab accounts stated that the empire of the Srivijayan Maharaja was so vast that the swiftest vessel would not have been able to travel around all of its island within 2 years. So just imagine how huge the islands were. I mean, the realm was. And we can also take note that this kingdom, they also traded with other nations. If not, foreign merchants and foreign diplomats would not have come to this kingdom like Srivijaya, and they left this huge legacy that remain until today. This was built by the seventh ruler of Srivijaya or Sailendra, Maharaja Samaratungga, in the 9th century AD. Still exists in Java. And after that came Majapahit. Majapahit was one of the biggest kingdom ever to emerge in the Malay archipelago, or they call it Nusantara, and traded with all these items. It shows that all these kingdoms were actually, in fact, not only were masters of the sea at that time, they also engaged themselves in trade and shipping activities. And in order for you to engage in trading activities, there must be a certain code of conduct with regards to ocean governance that they have to adhere to. All right. So this is the artist's impression of the city of Trowulan, believed to have existed during the 12th to 13th century AD as the capital of Majapahit. And after that came the Malacca Sultanate. Okay, not as big as the two previous ones, but this sultanate has profound influence on the strait that is now one of the busiest strait in the world, i.e. the Strait of Malacca. And at its height in the 15th century, it has command. It took command over the Strait of Malacca. And the Malacca Sultanate, in fact, have their own maritime laws. They have two main laws in Malacca at that time. Number one is the laws of Malacca, or in Malay we call it Undang-Undang Laut Malacca, Undang-Undang Malacca. And the second one is Maritime Laws of Malacca, Undang-Undang Laut Malacca. Okay, so we can safely say that based on this fact, Malacca is governed by a certain code of conduct with regards to ocean governance and maritime matters. And according to a Portuguese scholar, whoever is the Lord of Malacca has his hands on the throat of Venice. And this has attracted colonial powers to come and colonize, to rule over Malacca because of its strategic importance. And from 15th to 18th century, we know that the colonial powers has arrived in this region, and many other kingdoms throughout the archipelago emerged from Aceh all the way to Maguindanao. And they interact with each other. They send envoys. They also traded with each other, indicating that the law of the sea has been practiced through customary practices by the population of these indigenous kingdoms throughout Southeast Asia, indicating that we had maritime civilization in the past, and to a certain extent, we contributed to the development of the law of the sea. Right? Even though it's just through customary practices, but the Sultanate like Malacca have their own code, which was a written code. Now, let us move on to the European perspective, colonial history on how law of the sea developed. 3 distinct periods. And number 1 is from 14th to 15th century. If I were to ask you which countries are the strongest nations at the moment, I'm pretty sure out of all the participants that we have today, how many participants we have now? About almost 100 would argue that the strongest nations right now would be, for example, China or United States or Russia, and to a certain extent, some say countries that have nuclear power like India or Pakistan. It may not be Pakistan, it may not be. So these are among the notable countries that we can see strongest nations in the world at the moment, right? The 3 most popular ones are Russia, United States, and China. But in the 14th to 15th century, from the 14th to 15th century, we can take note that the strongest maritime nations, the strongest nations at that time were the ones who managed to control the sea. So during this period of time, there were 2 most powerful nations that has huge maritime armada and reputable reputation in maritime technology, i.e. Portugal and Spain. And if you could remember, in 1492, Columbus arrived in North America, not in the mainland United States, but he arrived in an island called Hispaniola over here, which housed 2 nations at the moment, Haiti and also Dominican Republic. He arrived there. And I watched a movie. I could not really remember what movie that was, but it depicted the story of how Columbus arrived to Hispaniola, and the local population of Hispaniola has some sort of they believe, they had a faith that one day a white man would arrive on this island and become their god. I might be wrong. I watched this movie a long time ago. And because the Spanish arrived, okay, and they thought that those people were special people because they arrived based on their premonition and whatnot. And finally, the local population were eradicated. And if you go to Hispaniola today, Haiti is most of the populations were African descent, and in Dominican Republic, most of the population are of Spanish descent. Okay, so one thing for sure, nothing could come good through violent colonization, like what the Spanish did in Americas, right? So if you could remember, the 2 most strongest powers in the world in the 15th century, the 14th to 15th century, were Portugal and Spain. Spain went to the west, and Portuguese fleet went to the east. And as they moved through Africa and Asia, they colonized a number of areas like Mombasa in Kenya, Goa in India, Malacca in Malaysia. They even went to Sunda Kelapa, to Jakarta, but they were then chased away by a local warrior there, and ended up in Macau and also East Timor, right? So one thing for sure, from this, we can take note that the Spanish and the Portuguese, they did not go into one direction. They went to two separate directions so that they will not meet each other. And this would reduce the probability of conflict. So who devised this? That they themselves, they entered into a treaty called Papal Bull of Demarcation in 1493, where the Pope divided the world into two parts. Number one, on the west is to be with Spain, and on the east to be with Portugal. So this is among the first maritime treaty that was entered by nations of the world. And this treaty, it was entered into by these two superpowers to divide the world into themselves, disregarding that other parts of the world also have their own population and also their desire to be ruled by themselves. But they disregarded this fact and took the world as to belong to them, because they are the strongest superpower at that time, maritime superpower. And after that, because of the Portuguese dissatisfaction with regards to the line of the Papal Bull demarcation, they entered into another treaty called Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, indicating that Brazil should be put under Portuguese dominion. That's the reason why today, if you go to South America, the whole of South America spoke Spanish, but Brazil, which is the largest Portuguese-speaking country in the world, right? And then as time passes by, the Spanish also said, now, we wanted another treaty because we wanted also, we want to, get some power over the Philippine Islands. So they entered into a treaty called Treaty of Zaragoza, putting Philippines as part of the dominions of the Spanish. And then later on, they entered into another treaty called Treaty of El Pardo that provided Spain with a tiny territory. I'm not talking about Western Sahara. I'm talking about another country, which is the only Spanish-speaking country in Africa, which is Equatorial Guinea over here. So the Portuguese and the Spanish, they entered into a treaty exchanging this tiny territory with some territory in Brazil. They gave it to Portuguese, and the Portuguese relinquished their foothold on this settlement called Equatorial Guinea, or Spanish Guinea in Africa. And Equatorial Guinea remained the only Spanish-speaking country in Africa today. One of the richest country in Africa because of oil, but yet most of its population live under the poverty line. It's very interesting if you watch the history of Equatorial Guinea, right? And if you now let's just move forward. And because of this arrangement, Malacca Sultanate that I mentioned earlier was colonized by the Portuguese in 1511. In 1511, and the Portuguese remained there for about a century until 1641 before the Dutch ousted them. Okay, so between the 15th to 16th century, we realized that the law of the sea was some sort of developed by these two main superpowers, so to speak. And later on, we from 15th to 19th century, it was the role of the Dutch and also the British and other European powers at that time that began to emerge as superpowers. The Dutch, for example, has a tiny nation in Europe, but they managed to colonize one of the largest countries in the world, the fourth most populous country in the world right now, Indonesia. Indonesia used to be under Dutch rule for quite some time. And the role of the Dutch at that time was they wanted to also roam the world. They wanted to sail the seas, and they were not satisfied by the fact that the Portuguese and the Spanish thought that they were the only ones that can own the world and own the seas. So what the Dutch did, there is a jurist by the name of Hugo Grotius. This is the Dutch jurist, and because he was not satisfied with what was going on, he wrote a thesis called Mare Liberum, the first book on the law of the sea, where he said in that particular thesis of his that no ocean can be the property of a nation, because it is impossible for any nation to take into possession by occupation. And also what he said was, the sea is one of those things which is not an article of merchandise and which cannot become private property. That no part of the sea can be considered as territory of any people whatsoever. And he wrote the first book. This book is said to be the first book on international law, particularly on the law of the sea. And he is popularly regarded as father of international law. So he propagated mare liberum, open sea. Anyone can go to the sea and sail as they like. However, his opinion is objected by a British jurist by the name of John Selden, where he propagated the concept of mare clausum, that a nation should have power or influence and power or sovereignty over over the seas closest to its shore. And he disputed Grotius Mare Liberum, to justify British dominions over British Isles. And this was the beginning of the concept of sovereignty over the oceans. And when the British and the Dutch arrived in the Malay Peninsula and Sumatra, they entered into a treaty called the 1824 Anglo-Dutch Treaty. They entered into a treaty called Anglo-Dutch Treaty 1824, which originally Dutch was in Malacca and British was in Bengkulu. So just like how the Portuguese and the Dutch divided the world into two parts, what the Dutch and British did, they exchanged Bengkulu and Malacca. So Dutch would have their powers on Bengkulu, which is somewhere in southern Sumatra, and Malacca would be given to the British so that they will not be in conflict with each other if their territories are located so close to each other. And as a result, the local Johor Riau Kingdom disintegrated, with Johor remain with Malaysia today and Riau as part of Indonesia today. So this was what happened through colonization. People of the same color, people of the same race, religion, language, they were made separated because of these colonial arrangements, right? And by the 19th century AD, the Dutch has grown into a formidable maritime power and started to annex the islands of the Indonesian or Malay archipelago, beginning with some Java, with the Eastern Indonesian islands, Kalimantan, and finally Aceh. So this was what the Dutch did bit by bit. They colonized bit by bit. And this is Dutch East Indies provinces in 1929. The same thing with the Philippines. And then Philippines were under American rule for quite some time. And Sulu was included as part of the Philippines later, even though historically Sabah used to be part of Sulu. And that's why we still have that kind of conflict today, because we are separated into many countries because of colonization. Because in the past, it used to be a borderless world, right? And when we gain independence as modern nations, we had to follow the territory that has been fixed by our former colonial master. What is the reason behind this? I will go to that soon. Right. And by the 19th century AD, okay, by the mid-20th century AD, we can see that almost all of Southeast Asia went into a colonization. Myanmar and Malaysia, Brunei and Singapore were under British rule. The Indo-Chinese region, i.e. Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos were under the French rule. Indonesia was under, Dutch East Indies were under the Dutch. Philippines, Spanish, and later on under the American rule. And East Timor was under Portuguese rule. Right, we can see this was how it was back then. Except for Siam, the Kingdom of Siam has managed to retain its independence for quite they managed to withstand the European pressure at that time. And later on came Japan. Okay, Japan then managed to become a world superpower, and they successfully expanded their empire to cover almost all parts of Southeast Asia. And if not for the Second World War, if not of the Japanese surrender in Second World War, all of us here today in this webinar would be Japanese subject, speaking Japanese, I suppose. So I don't really have to speak in English because we are all Japanese, holding Japanese passport, because if they did not lose the war, we will all be under Japanese empire. So that's also how borders could be reimagined again if history changed, right? So this was the condition on the political history of Southeast Asia during Japanese rule. And the reign of Japan was not that long, because they only ruled over Southeast Asia for about 3 years before later on they were defeated in World War II. And in 1945, decolonization of the world began, including decolonization of Southeast Asia. And like I said just now, colonization has caused many parts of Southeast Asia having population of the same religion, same language, same food, and same culture to be separated into different countries. How is this made possible? Right. Before World War II kicked in, okay, the Prime Minister of Britain and also the President of the United States entered into what we call as Atlantic Charter that would provide self-determination to their colonies should they win World War II. And this self-determination means that they would eventually give independence, eventually one way or another, provide independence to their ex-colonies. And this has to be done through the international concept of uti possidetis juris. Okay, what is uti possidetis juris? Uti possidetis juris, as far as the literal meaning is concerned, is the meaning of uti possidetis juris is as you possess. As you possess. But under international law, it means that the newly independent nations, particularly after World War II, newly independent nations have to inherit the territories of what has been fixed by its former colonial master. For example, Malaysia today, if you look at the map of Malaysia during the time of Srivijaya, the territories of the former Srivijaya included as far north as Thailand, all the way south to Indonesia, to Java. But that's not possible anymore because we cannot inherit that part of history's territory. What Malaysia could inherit was British Borneo and British Malaya. The same goes with Indonesia. Okay, the same goes with Indonesia. Indonesia becomes a country it is today because it inherited what used to be part of the Dutch East Indies. The same with the Philippines, the same with Myanmar and whatnot. So this is what it meant by uti possidetis juris. Okay, and it created weird maritime boundaries all across Southeast Asia. For example, this photo here, you can see skyscrapers on the other side and port on this side. Okay, it is located so close to each other. It's about 6 kilometers away, and this is the city of Singapore, and this is the port of Batam. So close to each other, used to be ruled by the same regional kingdom before they were colonized by 2 different colonial masters. This was taken by the British, and this was the Dutch. And when they gained independence, they became separated into 2 different nations. Now it's no longer borderless world. It is a world with borders. And after that, okay, this is another example in Thailand, an area called northeastern province of Malaysia in a state of Kelantan. It borders Thailand. And this river here, this tiny river that gets dry during drought season, has been determined by the Thai and the British authorities as the main boundary, international boundary between the then British Malaya and Siam. And it remained like this until today. And during drought season, I have witnessed myself that I saw the Thais and Malaysians, they actually walk across the river because it was, it's easy to do that. And this the treaty that has fixed this river as the international boundary between British Malaya and Siam was the Anglo-Saints Treaty 1909. Even though this is Kelantan in Malaysia and this is Narathiwat in Thailand, the people of both sides are Malays, Muslims, speak the same language, adhere to the same religion, but they are separated into two different countries because of this Anglo-Thai Treaty, Anglo-Saints Treaty in 1909. Right. So this is how colonization affected us, and we inherit the borders that has been left by our former colonial master. And another weird boundary that I can share with you, it's really interesting, is the boundary between Malaysia and Indonesia in Pulau Sebatik. Who created these boundaries? Obviously, it's the arrangement between the British, who govern Sabah, and the Dutch, who govern Kalimantan at that time. As you can see here, this is Indonesia. This island is divided into two parts with this one straight line crossing it, putting it into Indonesia and Malaysia. Okay, and one thing interesting about this is that there is a house located on this island, which is comfortably placed at the boundary line between these two nations. So they call it the House of Two Nations. Okay, the House of Two Nations, where if I'm not mistaken, the living room is in Indonesia and the kitchen is in Malaysia, or it can be the other way around. But my point is that if you want to go to your kitchen, you will be traveling into another country. And if you want to hang out in your own living room, you would be having to travel into another country to do that. And this is like one of the tourist spots in that particular island. They call it Rumah Dua Negara, which means the House of Two Nations, where Indonesia is over here and Malaysia is over there. It's really weird, but this is how it is. And the third period, we have learned that the local population, local Southeast Asians, have exercised law of the sea through customary practices. And then we know that during colonial times, law of the sea is also expanded. And in fact, during these colonial times, Hugo Grotius came out with a book called Mare Liberum, which is the open sea. And as time passes by, law of the sea developed, particularly through customary practices and also through treaties. Okay, one has to remember, during colonial times, during colonial era, there were not many countries. So when there were not many countries, let me remove this. When there were not many countries, existing, there would be less disputation and the rules will not be as complex. But after 1945, after the end of World War II, we can see the proliferation of the number of states, of number of colonies gaining independence. So because of the increased number of states gaining independence, it also increased the number of disputes. Okay, it also increased the number of disputes. And when disputes have increased, it changed the rule that used to be not so complex to become really complex. For instance, maritime states wanted the sea to be open to all because they have huge maritime armada. But newly independent states like, for example, Togo, Benin, Malaysia, Indonesia for that matter, we want more sovereignty. We want to exercise more sovereignty, more sovereign powers over our closest coastal area. But for maritime states, because they have huge maritime armada, they do not want to be bound by mare clausum, so-called mare clausum. They want the sea to be mare liberum, so that they can freely sail the seas. So because of this, rules that used to be not so complex became complex, right? And the law of the sea has been deliberated in a number of international conferences. Number one is in the United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea 1, that gave birth to Territorial Sea Convention. but it's not entirely all-encompassing because they did not discuss on the breadth of the territorial sea. They did discuss, but it's more on the fishing zone. They have not settled on that particular part. And they came up with another conference called United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea 2, which also ended in failure. And the final one, the United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea 3, that took place for about a decade, was successful in giving birth to the Law of the Sea Convention 1982 that came into force in 1994 after Guyana, the 60th nation of Guyana, became a state party because it was a minimum 60 states for the convention to take into force, to come into force. So the Law of the Sea Convention finally came into force in 1994. It's the most significant modification of the Law of the Sea in the past 500 years, before colonial times and also during colonial times, and regulate most contemporary marine sector activities. Source of conflict among states at the same time unites them, and it came into force in 1994 for the rest of for the convention. And as far as Malaysia is concerned, it came into force in 1996. And as you can see here, most of the countries of the world has become state parties to the Law of the Sea Convention, and includes all countries in Southeast Asia as well. But there are certain nations that are not state parties to the Law of the Sea Convention, i.e. The United States and all the landlocked countries like the former Soviet Union of all the Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, all these countries in this region. Okay, so but as far as our nations are concerned, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines, we are all state parties to the Law of the Sea Convention. And how does this Law of the Sea Convention affect our claims, our maritime entitlements? If you attended Prof. Schofield talk yesterday, he actually explained on how Law of the Sea Convention provided maritime entitlement to the coastal states. Let me just recap again. So from baseline, a coastal state may claim up to 12 nautical miles territorial sea. And in this territorial sea, the coastal state has sovereignty over not only the seabed, the water column, as far as also the airspace above it. And in this area, it's called territorial sea. The coastal state has sovereignty over it, and foreign vessels could only sail through this zone if they're exercising innocent passage. Article 17, 18, 19 of the Law of the Sea Convention. And if foreign vessel is discovered to have even such navigation of foreign vessel may undermine the security of the coastal state, the vessel may be asked to leave the territorial sea of that particular coastal state. And beyond these 12 nautical miles, measured from the baseline, is what we call as exclusive economic zone. Exclusive economic zone, where states have freedom of navigation to sail through it. And this only refers to sovereign rights of the coastal state to exploit living resources in the water column. So exclusive economic zone refers only to the water column, and in this zone, it's no longer sovereignty but sovereign rights. Okay, and foreign vessels can sail through this EEZ area without exercising innocent passage. They can exercise freedom of navigation. And underneath it, in continental shelf, also it refers to seabed area where coastal state may exercise sovereign right, not sovereignty. Okay, that's the reason why in certain boundaries of the world, there are in the same maritime area, the water column belongs to a different country and the seabed belongs to a different country. A very good example would be in the Timor Sea between Australia and Indonesia. The water column belongs to Indonesia. I mean, if the fish is caught in that area, the fish or other living resources would belong to Indonesia. But if you want to mine oil, or if there is any living or non-living resources on the seabed, then that does not belong to Indonesia. It belongs to Australia. So that is how in the same maritime zone, in the same maritime area, okay, the water column, EEZ, could belong to another state, and the continental shelf, which is the seabed, could belong to another. And beyond the 200 nautical miles would be the high seas, where it's a no man's land. As you can see that if I go to the seabed column or extended continental shelf, then it would be a more prolonged discussion, but I would like to focus on this now. And as you can see here, what the regime, ocean governance, the law of the sea that we have today is the amalgamation of the two concepts propagated by Hugo Grotius and also John Selden. So what we can say that in the territorial sea, it's more like of a mare clausum. EEZ and continental shelf is amalgamation of mare clausum and mare liberum. And the high seas and seabed area beyond national jurisdiction would be areas where mare liberum is exercised, right? So how does it impact on Southeast Asia? I will not discuss each and every country in Southeast Asia. What I will be doing is to discuss certain certain issues with regards to Singapore and also Indonesia. Okay, number one, I would like to bring you to, I think I have been sharing this repeatedly in a number of webinar and seminar around the world. Okay, as you can see here, this is Indonesia and this is Malaysia. And this is the Malaysia-Indonesia continental shelf seabed border that has been determined in 1969. And down here is the territorial sea border. Why is there no continental shelf here? Because in this area, it's too narrow to have continental shelf. Because when Malaysia and Indonesia claim 12 nautical miles from each side in the southern part of the Strait of Malacca, it does not really leave any high seas corridor or the continental shelf corridor in that area. So continental shelf is drawn here, border is drawn here, and territorial sea border is drawn down here. And take note of the year, it's 1969 and 1970. During this time, the Law of the Sea Convention has not came into force yet. It came into being in 1982, and this was in 1970. So exclusive economic zone is one of the products of the Law of the Sea Convention. So at that time, Malaysia and Indonesia have not yet determined the boundary line for the EEZ. Okay, and as a result, it's still ongoing. I do not know whether it has settled or not, but I have never came across any news saying that it has been settled. But if it has been settled, then it's good for both countries. And what the dispute is like this. Okay, Malaysia wanted the same continental shelf line to be used as EEZ boundary line, but Indonesia is proposing this line, which is based on equidistance principle. Okay, this white line, as you can see, that it's bended a little bit over here because of Pulau Jarak belonging to Malaysia, and then it goes like this again. So it leaves a gray area. It leaves gray area where you do not know that fish and also other living resources belongs to whom. And sometimes when I read Indonesia's newspaper and when I read Malaysia's newspaper, they say that we are stealing each other's fish. Sometimes it may be true, sometimes it may not. Because of this arrangement like this, we do not know to whom the EEZ belongs to. Indonesia said it is their EEZ. Malaysia then said it's our EEZ. So as a result, in 2012, there was an MOU signed by two nations that we do not take action against fishermen of each other's nation if they were caught by the authorities of Malaysia or Indonesia. Because it is still like this, and through the new map of Indonesia in 2017, as you can see here, it says that Indonesia is still claiming a new line, not the continental shelf line as determined by Malaysia. And we are still waiting for what is going to happen here. Okay, and sebab tu, that's why Malaysians and Indonesians, if you read the newspaper and there is a report saying that we are stealing each other's fish, please do more research before you get angry at each other. because we have to be more civil than this because we learn international law. Okay, and let's move on to another issue with regards to Singapore. Okay, if you have heard the name Pedra Branca, then my job is done. But if you have not heard of the name Pedra Branca, it's a small rock. It's a small rock located in the southern part of South China Sea towards the opening to the Strait of Singapore. Okay, Malaysia and Singapore has agreed to bring this case, just like Malaysia and Indonesia agreed to bring Pulau Sipadan and Ligitan to the ICJ in early 2000s. And it was decided in 2001, if I'm not mistaken. Both nations have to agree to go to ICJ for them to have these problems resolved. That you cannot just force another country to do as you like. This is different with municipal law. Let's say I am indebted to the bank for about 50,000 ringgit. Okay, 50,000 ringgit, 500,000 pesos, or 2 billion rupiah to a certain bank. Okay, the bank could take action against me and I will be brought to the court. But this is not the case with sovereign states. You cannot just simply say, because sometimes it makes me feel that people should be made aware of this. You cannot simply drag a country to the court, because sometimes when I read, you like to read comments made by netizens on Facebook, on Twitter, and also on IG. I often read some comments made by them, just drag this country to ICJ. Let's bring this case to the ICJ. Let ICJ decide. But it's not as simple as that. We are not dealing with individuals. We are dealing with a sovereign state. And sovereign state have sovereignty, and when we are dealing with sovereignty, it means that the state has exclusive rights to choose or not to choose to go to ICJ or otherwise. So as far as Malaysia and Indonesia with Sipadan Ligitan and Malaysia and Singapore with regards to Pedra Branca are concerned, both nations agreed to go to the ICJ. This is also different with the Philippines and China arbitration that I will discuss about it later, but I would like to focus on this now. Okay, in 2008, the court awarded the sovereignty of Pedra Branca to Singapore, while the Middle Rocks, or we call in Malay as Batuan Tengah, was awarded to Malaysia. Okay, and let me just show you a map on where these rocks are located. Okay, this is Pedra Branca. This is Middle Rocks, and down there is South Ledge. So in 2008, the ICJ has awarded this maritime rock to Singapore. Middle Rocks to belong to Malaysia, and this is to be determined by Malaysia and Indonesia to whom it belongs to. Initially in ICJ, Singapore claimed all these three maritime features to belong to them. But in 2008, the ICJ awarded Pedra Branca to Malaysia. But in the earlier parts of the judgment issued by the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, acknowledged that historically, Pedra Branca the sovereignty over Pedra Branca was with the Johor Sultanate before modern Malaysia was born. Okay, so historically it belonged to Johor, but because of certain turn of events along the way, it then belonged to Singapore today, and it remained with Singapore until today. And in this area, Pedra Branca is over here. Claimant number 1 is Malaysia, claimant number 2 is Singapore, and claimant number 3 is Indonesia, because Pedra Branca and Pulau Bintan is not too far away from each other. Okay, and Indonesia has also finalized their, if you look at this map over here, Indonesia has finalized their, what do you call that, baseline. Okay, their baseline. Okay, and then something has to be done with regards to the agreed boundary line between Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore over here. Okay, so if you look at this map, originally, if people just look at this map, in terms of distance, one can say that Petra Branca is closer to Johor if compared to mainland Singapore. Singapore is like 60 nautical miles. So I'm not really sure about the distance, but with the coast of Johor is about 7.7 nautical miles, right? And we can also say that originally Singapore is a geographically disadvantaged state. Okay, Singapore is a geographically disadvantaged state where it's totally surrounded by Malaysia in the north and surrounded by Indonesia in the south. Okay, and without Petra Branca, they would not have any maritime territory in the South China Sea. That's true. That's true. Eh? Without Petra Branca, they would not have maritime territory in the South China Sea. As you can see that Malaysia and Singapore has also entered into a treaty, maritime boundaries. It was originally entered into by the Sultan of Johor in 1927 with the British government of Singapore, and then it was the treaty was again signed in 1995 to properly delimit the boundary line between Malaysia and Singapore. As you can see, it is from the west portion all the way to the eastern portion of the island of Singapore. Okay, so originally it's a geographically disadvantaged state. So now Petra Branca belongs to Singapore, right? Would this allow Singapore to claim EEZ in the South China Sea in the future? Territorial seas, for sure, they could claim it. But how about exclusive economic zone? And let's have an academic discussion on this. Okay, if you look at Petra Branca, you have a question whether it's an island or a rock. And in Article 121, Clause 1 of the Law of the Sea Convention, an island is a naturally formed area of land surrounded by water, which is above water at high tide. And if you look at provision number 2, okay, territorial sea, an island could claim territorial sea, contiguous zone, EEZ, continental shelf, right? But if you look at the third provision, rocks which cannot sustain human habitation or economic life of their own shall have no EEZ or continental shelf. I realized yesterday during Prof. Schofield's talk, there are questions about what are the effects of land reclamation. I suppose this is a question with many possible answers. So now one would determine, is this an island or a rock? And how does the Law of the Sea Convention define an island? It says that an island is naturally formed area of land surrounded by water, and it must be able to sustain human habitation or economic life of their own. If you look at this, Petra Branca, could they sustain human habitation? Could they sustain, have economic life of their own? Okay, as I'm an academic from Malaysia, I would suggest that it's not an island, it's a rock. The same goes with Malaysian territory over here. Let me show you just a photo to show how close these two maritime features are. Okay, so this is Petra Branca belonging to Singapore, and this is Middle Rocks, one of the rocks of Middle Rocks belonging to Malaysia. And do you know how far the distance between these two features? 600 meters. So if you're a good swimmer, you can swim across. But I'm pretty sure the authorities of both Malaysia and Singapore will shoot you down, right? Because nobody would want to swim here. Why should you? Why would you? Right? And because it's so close to each other, this is a rock now, and this is based on what I can come up with here. I would also suggest that based on the name Petra Branca, white rock in Portuguese, it's also a rock. But however, if let's say, just hypothetically say that it is an island. So what would happen? What would happen in this particular part of the world? Okay, I must give credit to this diagram here, to this map here, as it is drawn by my dear friend, Dr. Andi Arsana. He drew this map, and I obtained it from him back in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so this is a map drawn by Dr. Andi Arsana. So I'm pretty sure it's really accurate, and it's easy to read. And if you look at this map over here, South Ledge is over here. Okay, this is the Indonesian archipelagic baseline, and from this baseline, Indonesia could claim territorial sea, right? Okay, so and if you look at this, in this area, there are three countries. Two countries which is located so close to each other: Singapore and Malaysia. South Ledge is for Malaysia and Singapore to determine to whom it belongs to. Obviously, Malaysia wants South Ledge to be part of their territory, and Singapore would want the same. So if you say about Pedra Branca, this is the maximum extent of the territorial sea that it could claim if it does not face any objection from other countries, because it's under international law. If you want to object to anything that has been done by your neighbors, you have to always issue a diplomatic protest against that, right? And let's say hypothetically, Pedra Branca is acknowledged as an island because Singapore is reclaiming the land around Pedra. I mean, the work has started, or the work is going to start soon. This would then be, and if it's an island based on Article 121, Clause 2 of the Law of the Sea Convention, then Singapore could also have some portion of area as its EEZ in the South China Sea. Based on this fact, I just want to share with you that a tiny piece of rock in the middle of the sea could mean so much to any nations. So I urge Malaysians, Indonesians, Filipinos, or any other participants of any nationality here, if you work with the government and you arrange, if you are working with any governmental department on policy, you have to realize that even a small, tiny rock in the middle of the ocean means so much to your country. Just imagine. Singapore, originally, I'm saying originally, it's in the past, before they managed to win over Pedra Branca, it used to be a geographically disadvantaged state. Their territories end here. And in 1979, Peta 1979, the map of 1979, Malaysia included Pedra Branca as part of Malaysia's territory. And what Singapore did, Singapore protested against it. And then later on, because they do not manage to come to a common term, both nations brought this case to the ICJ. And just because of one tiny piece of rock in the middle of the sea, I think the size of a football field, look at how it changed the maritime territory of a country that will not have any maritime territory in the South China Sea, if not of this small piece of rock. Okay, this is Pedra Branca. This is how it could change it provides maritime territory for Singapore in the South China Sea, right? And if it is acknowledged as an island, and this is the potential EEZ area that Singapore could claim. This is really fascinating, and really I enjoy reading this because just one tiny piece of rock. And like country like Malaysia, we have lots and lots of islands. Indonesia, what more? Philippines also have lots and lots of islands. So I urge you, love your islands. Okay, so let's move on. This is South Ledge. South Ledge is over here. The ICJ did not decide to whom it belongs to. ICJ has decided that Pedra Branca belongs to Singapore, Middle Rocks belongs to Malaysia. And now the question is, Malaysia and Singapore have to draw boundary lines over here. But boundary lines have not been drawn yet. Once boundary line have been drawn, then they could decide to whom South Ledge belongs to, right? And South Ledge is not a maritime rock. It's neither a maritime rock nor an island. It's actually an LTE, a low tide elevation. And Article 13 of the Law of the Sea Convention specifies that a low tide elevation could not generate territorial sea, but could be used to measure baseline. Whose baseline? Then it's up to nations to negotiate, right? And in 2020, before the pandemic hit, Singapore and Malaysia agreed to begin talks on delimiting maritime boundaries for Pedra Branca, Middle Rocks, and South Ledge. But if you look at the date of this article, it was published in January 2020. And in 18 March 2020, Malaysia was under partial lockdown until today. So I think this is still ongoing. The discussion is still ongoing. And these are among the news that I have written. This is in because recently Singapore has announced that they would start reclaiming lands around Pedra Branca. But I'm of the opinion that before they start doing that, the first thing Malaysia and Singapore should do is to determine their maritime boundaries in that area first. Once maritime boundary has been determined through a treaty, okay, and we know to whom the maritime area belongs to, then you can just reclaim lands as you like. So that's why I published an article in Jakarta Post on 13th of July. As far as Pedra Branca is concerned, I come to a conclusion that both Malaysia and Singapore are lost in borderless waters. Because before they start doing any reclamation land there, Malaysia is also doing land reclamation near Mineral Rocks. They are supposed to first draw maritime boundaries there so that they will know which area belongs to them and which area belongs to their neighbor. Just like this map over here. Okay, this is a map of Singapore. Oh, I really miss going to Singapore. I've not been there for more than a year now. And if you look at the boundary line from Jurong all the way to Pengerang here, this line has been fixed since 1995. And what Professor Schofield mentioned yesterday, Singapore has grown rapidly through land reclamation, right? Okay, so if you look at here, Pulau Tekong Island. Tekong Island used to be much smaller in size, but because of land reclamation, it has grown bigger. And if you look at how the island grew, it followed the maritime boundary that has been fixed between Malaysia and Indonesia. Malaysia and Singapore, not Malaysia and Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore. So that's why it goes around like this to remain in their realm. But as far as Pedra Branca is concerned, you look at the map here, there has yet to be a proper maritime boundary between Malaysia and Singapore. So if this is not done, then Singapore can reclaim as they like. Malaysia can also do the same. Question arises, until when we will get a proper maritime boundary line here? And now, this is not only in borderless world, now it's really crucial to have borders, particularly in this disputed area over here. Once boundary lines has been fixed, like the one in the Strait of Johor between Malaysia and Singapore, then you can reclaim lands as you like, because you know which area belongs to you, which maritime area belongs to your neighbor. Malaysia also have done extensive land reclamation projects in the city of Johor Bahru. Okay, so once maritime boundary line has been fixed, then you can reclaim land as you like. Because if you do it now without the proper maritime boundary lines, then this dispute will be never ending. In fact, I believe if Malaysia and Singapore do not resolve this maritime dispute in Pedra Branca, then they are like sweeping their mess under the carpet. This problem will re-emerge again soon with bigger complications. So it's better for them to resolve their dispute now. Better late than never. Okay, so the final issue that I want to touch, because it's already 3:13. I promise I'll finish by 3:30. I'll finish by 4:30. It's already 4:30. 4:13. Okay, I would like to talk about South China Sea. I'm pretty sure there are also questions about South China Sea yesterday. This is Spratly Islands, and the reason why it is named Spratly Islands because it was named after Richard Spratly, a mariner who navigated the islands in the 19th century. European powers showed little interest in these islands. And during Japanese occupation, they took control over the Spratlys. And after the fall of the Japanese Empire in 1945, Japan did not name successor states to the Spratly based on the Peace Treaty of San Francisco, where it was stated that Japan did formally renounce its claim to Spratly Islands at the San Francisco Peace Treaty in 1951. It did not, however, name a sovereign successor. As China has always seen the South China Sea as part of their territory. And this is the 9-dash line. This map may not be entirely accurate, but just to give you just a picture on how it looks like. Professor Lowell Bautista might be discussing more about this issue tomorrow. And this is the 9-dash line that is drawn from mainland China all the way south to Sarawak in Malaysia. This is the, and when I give a talk in Sherman University, I was invited as a visiting professor in Sherman University in 2019. This issue is a really contentious issue, and I really have to be wary of what I say. And the Chinese are really adamant to say that this belongs to them. We also have to be adamant to say that this maritime area belongs to us too, right? And besides China, and China is claiming all these areas as their quote-unquote historic waters. But other nations like Malaysia is claiming as EEZ and continental shelf. We in fact deposited our claim in the UN last year with regards to the extent, the limits of our continental shelf, but China has protested against that. That happened last year in early 2020 before the pandemic hits us. And this is what claimed by Brunei, Vietnam, Philippines, and also, yeah, this is back to China, right? And even though in 2016, even though Indonesia originally does not have, has claimed that they are not part of the dispute, but because the exclusive economic zone around Indonesia's Natuna archipelago overlaps with the 9-dash line, Indonesia is also maybe part of the of the complex claim that we have here now, because the EEZ of Natuna overlaps with the 9-dash line as reported in the Nikkei Asian Review article over here. And right, we understand that the Philippines has already brought a case to the Permanent Court of International Arbitration in 2016, and we welcome the award that has been issued by the PCIA. The Philippines has asked an arbitral tribunal to rule on whether China's 9-dash line is a valid maritime claim and whether 8 Chinese-occupied disputed features qualify as low-tide elevation rocks or islands. And what the tribunal has mentioned, what the international PCIA has clearly said that, China has to stop all their work in the South China Sea, particularly on the artificial islands. That's number one. And number two, the 9-dash line is against international law. But because this was a unilateral move made by Philippines and China was not involved in the arbitration, so according to China, they regarded this arbitration, the award, as waste paper, and China still refuses to recognize 5-year-old arbitration award. And this was published quite recently on July 12, 2021 by Philstar Global. So why do they regard this as waste paper? Because they are not, like I said earlier, if you want, you cannot just drag another country to go to the court. They must give consent. But because in this arbitration, Philippines unilaterally brought China, so that's why China refuses to recognize this arbitration award. And as far as Malaysian government is concerned, we are adamant to say that the government of Malaysia rejects China's claim to historic rights or sovereign rights or jurisdiction with respect to the maritime areas of the South China Sea encompassed by the relevant parts of the 9-dash line, as they are contrary to the convention and without lawful effect to the extent that they exceed the geographic and substantive limits of China's maritime entitlements under the convention. So as far as Malaysia's stance is concerned, we are adamant that China's historic rights or other sovereign rights or jurisdiction claimed through the 9-dash line is against international law, particularly the law of the sea convention. And this was issued by, this note verbal was issued by Malaysia to the UN on 29 July 2020 in conjunction with my article that was published on the same day in the New Straits Times, July 29, 2020. As far as South China Sea is concerned, they are still developing what you call as code of conduct. I do not know. I have not seen the code of conduct yet, and let us see how it may actually regulate the conduct of each countries in the South China Sea. And at the same time, the US went into South China Sea to exercise freedom of navigation operations to show to the world that that particular maritime area in the South China Sea does not belong to China. So I do not know what would happen next, but what's important, countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, we are not superpowers like China. So what we could do is to consistently object to whatever being said or done by China with regards to what they are doing in the South China Sea. It's impossible for us to go to war against China. We are not huge. We are not a superpower. So the best way to go about this is to consistently act together. Number one, and number two is to consistently protest against whatever China is doing in the South China Sea, which is against our sovereign rights and against our sovereignty and our sovereign rights. So this is what an article that I wrote last month with regards to China's aircraft having military exercises in the South China Sea area, in a maritime area belonging to Malaysia. So that's why I keep saying that Malaysia must be firm in protest, particularly when it involves the South China Sea. Right? If we keep quiet and do nothing, this could be deemed as agreeing to what has been done by countries, not only China, other countries with regards to their territorial claims. And if we do not do something, we do not issue diplomatic protests, it shows that we are agreeing to what has been done by other countries, our neighbors or other countries that wants to claim the area that is supposed to be the maritime area belonging to your country, something like that. And in conclusion, this is me with being interviewed by national TV a couple of years ago. I mean, not a couple of years ago, a couple of months ago before the pandemic hits. And I would also like to invite you to visit my website at hazmirusli.com. I have written a number of articles with regards to overlapping maritime claims in the South China Sea. I would invite you to visit my website. And if you have any questions, let us discuss it now. And I will try my best to address to them one by one. Thank you. Back to you, Ms. Chairperson.
Thank you, Prof. Hazmi. Now we are open for the Q&A session. If you have any question, you can leave them in the chat box and we can ask them for you. Don't forget to state your name and of course the question. Or you can unmute your audio, introduce yourself and ask your question. So now let us look. So we have one question from Nadira Zulkifli. Salam and hi Prof. Madya Dr. Hazmi. I have a question regarding the borderless line of maritime boundary of Pedra Branca, South Ledge and Middle Rock. Due to this dispute between Singapore and Malaysia, why we did not take an alternative to form the border to avoid further disputes over maritime territories in the future?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this question. From Nadira, right? From Nanat. Okay, with regards to this particular question, I think what Singapore and Malaysia are doing right now is the alternative. Because they are trying to resolve the maritime dispute between the two nations, but they have failed to do that since 2008. You have to remember that the ICJ decided on this case in 2008. And this is now it's 2021. So if you are born in 2008, means that you are 13 years old now. And the dispute has yet to be resolved. That's the reason why now Singapore is moving ahead with their reclamation work without finalizing the maritime disputes between the two nations. Malaysia is also doing the same thing. If I remember, during the time of Tun Mahathir taking administration of Malaysia back in 2018, among the first things that the Malaysian government did was first because before this, we wanted to go to the ICJ before 2018. because our government changed in 2018. Before 2018, we wanted to go to the ICJ again to revise the decision made by the ICJ, because in the ICJ we cannot appeal against the decision made by the ICJ, but what we can do is to revise the decision made by the ICJ if we manage to find new evidence to show that what the ICJ has decided previously was wrong. Okay. However, Malaysian government was all prepared at that time to bring new evidence to the ICJ to reopen Pedra Branca's case and to revise the decision, because the revision could only be made within 10 years. 10 tahun, 10 years. If the revision is not made within 10 years, then that's it. You can no longer do that. So if we go back to history, the decision was made in 2008. And then Malaysian government wanted to file for revision in 2017. So when the revision was ongoing, Malaysian election took place, and the government that was administrating Malaysia at that time lost the election, and new government emerged. And one of the first things that Tun Mahathir did when he took power was to withdraw this application of revision. Singapore was really happy. I'm partly happy because I do not know how strong the new evidence were, because I was not privy to it. I was not even being I had no knowledge on how these three evidence were like. So partly I'm happy that they withdraw the case, because let's say if we lost again, then it will be really be very disappointing, not only for the Malaysian leaders but also for Malaysia as a whole. Okay, so you have to remember that we have tried to apply for revision of the decision of Pedra Branca in the ICJ. So because you are talking about alternatives, so that was the first thing we did. But when Pakatan Harapan government took power, they withdrew the application revision, the application to make revision at the ICJ. So right now, it's safe to say that Pedra Branca is lost forever. It now belongs to Singapore. We have to respect that as a sovereign state and as a good neighbor. We have to respect Singapore's sovereignty over Pedra Branca. Okay, and that's number 2. And number 3, the first thing we have to do is to build fence. Whenever we have a house, we have to build fence. Okay, why do we have to build fence? The reason why we have to, like what my learned friend, Dr. Andi Arsana said, good fences make good neighbors. Okay, kalau dalam bahasa Melayu, pagar yang baik membentuk jiran yang baik. Okay, good fences make good neighbors. Okay, in Pedra Branca, there is no fence to speak of in the first place. That's exactly like what happened in Priah Vihear between Thailand and Cambodia. The ICJ decided that the temple to belong to Cambodia, but the compound around it, it's up to you to decide. So the ICJ has not resolved the case in totality, exactly like what happened in Pedra Branca. That's the reason why the alternative because Malaysia and Singapore have yet to draw proper maritime boundaries between Pedra Branca and the rocks. The alternative that they are taking, the alternative effort they are taking now is to proceed with land reclamation. So middle rocks will get bigger, I suppose. Pedra Branca will also get bigger. But the issue here is now, if we do not draw maritime boundary lines and move forward with reclamation as an alternative way to resolve dispute, will this resolve dispute in totality? I don't think so, because as the rocks become bigger, both for Pedra Branca and the rocks, it will also create new problems in the future, right? Because we have not determined to whom the maritime areas belong to. So to go back to Nadra's question just now. Oh, there are many questions now. Just now I saw only one. Now it is like 3 questions. Okay, so to go to Nadira's question just now. Okay, we actually land reclamation without having to solve maritime dispute is an alternative that Malaysia and Singapore is taking right now, but it's not a good alternative. I believe that the only way to move forward is to draw proper maritime boundary lines between two nations. Indonesia has been very successful in drawing proper maritime boundaries, especially with Australia. They have, I think, finished everything, right, Pak Andi, with Australia? Yeah. So if they can do that, why can't we? Right. So the same goes with Indonesia too. If Indonesia can complete their maritime boundary claims their proper maritime boundaries with Australia, for sure, with immediate neighbors like Malaysia, we can also achieve something. So if we keep sweeping this under the floor, I believe that this issue will not be resolved until the end of time. So maybe nanti, if we do not resolve this issue, bigger problems will occur. And there would be sentiments against Singaporeans, sentiments against Indonesian, Malaysians, and this is not good for the well-being of ASEAN. Okay, so let's move on to the second question. Do you want to read for Sharifah? Do you want to read the question out?
Before we proceed with the question in the chat box, I would like to invite Miss Patricia Audrey to ask her question.
Yes. Hello, Hazmi. How are you?
Hello, Audrey. Bagaimana semuanya di Malang? Bagus ya?
Yeah, so far so good.
So far so good. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask about the opinion of yours regarding the biodiversity in the areas beyond national jurisdiction, because actually this is up till now this is the real problem, and there are lots of debates between developed states and developing countries. Since the regulation in Nagoya Protocol only concern mainly with the resources within the national jurisdiction. So even in the UNCLOS itself didn't regulate very complete. So I want to ask your opinion regarding this one.
Okay, thank you, Audrey. Okay, this question is obviously it's beyond borders. This question is beyond the borders because what Dr. Patricia Audrey was asking was about BBNJ, biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, i.e., are you referring more to the area, right?
Yes.
Audrey? Part 11 of the Law of the Sea Convention. And this is quite a contentious topic. You know why? Because exploration has started, but exploitation has yet to start. I believe so. Exploration has many countries have started exploring the seabed area beyond national jurisdiction. Singapore has done that. I'm not too sure about Malaysia. Prof. Rahmat has mentioned to me, Prof. Rahmat, the professor who gave the talk this morning, he is one of those who has pushed the government to go into this, to venture into this. So how do we regulate the marine environment in areas beyond national jurisdiction? So I suppose in order for us to do that, we may adopt what we are doing now because we have no experience. There are not extensive exploitation of areas beyond national jurisdiction, particularly seabed beyond national jurisdiction, have not been done yet. Extensive exploitation, even exploitation has not started yet. So the only way for us to be on the safe side so that the seabed area will not be badly affected is to take experience on how we protect areas within national jurisdiction. And those countries that is going to exploit, exploit the certain areas within the areas beyond national jurisdiction have to be aware that they have to do it without undermining the well-being of the marine environment of that particular area beyond national jurisdiction. So since that's also the reason why the United States is reluctant to become state party to the Law of the Sea Convention, because of Part 11 of UNCLOS on seabed beyond national jurisdiction. So I guess the best way is for nations to take lessons from the laws that they already have in protecting marine environment within national jurisdiction, and use the particularly provisions of the law that is practical to be made applicable also in protecting biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. So I think this is my, roughly my idea. Maybe you have other ideas, but that is exactly how I see it, because extensive exploitation of areas beyond national jurisdiction have not started yet. Just like COVID-19, nobody has, we do not know what COVID-19 would do to the world. Only after a year, then we came with a vaccine. And even if vaccine is there, many people are still scared of doing it. So someone has to start. Once someone starts, only then we will know how to better protect areas beyond national jurisdiction. I think that's my general idea. Thank you very much, Audrey.
Thank you, Hazmi.
Okay, now.
Thank you, Prof. And Ms. Audrey. Next, we proceed with the next question from Jonathan Maliwat. He said that, "Hi, Prof. I would like to point out two issues. First, the 2000 Scarborough Shoal dispute, and second, the 2016 PCA ruling against China on this SCS verdict, which you mentioned earlier. My question is, why ASEAN is so silent in dealing with these issues, especially for a non-Asian member? What do you think ASEAN must do in addressing these issues?"
Okay, so this is a very, I would say, interesting yet popular question. Many people have been questioning why ASEAN has been quiet. In my opinion, ASEAN has not been quiet. ASEAN has been quiet is a strong word. ASEAN has been very, very diplomatic. I guess so, because each and every time they have this foreign ministries summit, they will come back. As far as South China Sea is concerned, they would come back, like, for example, Malaysia's foreign minister would come back and say that, oh, everything is moving smoothly. We are developing the code of conduct in the South China Sea. And when the reporter asked him again, okay, don't you think that there is no development because you keep saying the same thing? And then the minister would then say that, okay, this is a development, but a very slow development. At least we are not fighting against each other. We are not in conflict with each other. And we are trying to solve this problem in a very diplomatic way. As long as it's moving, even though it is slow moving, it's okay. And the fact that we are not at war at each other, it shows that ASEAN is working. So that is what the minister said during the press conference. I still remember because I was also invited to give some feedbacks on that by that particular news channel. So I guess why ASEAN is so silent. Okay, ASEAN is so silent because, number one, we do not want to, as far as relationship with China is concerned, we do not want to sever our relationship with China, because we know that China is a huge trading partner. But at least through the PCA award in 2016, this has shown that, I'm not saying that the Philippines' effort in bringing the case to the PCA in 2016 is left in vain. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Philippines has put a lot of effort, and as a neighboring country, as a Malaysian, I'm really thankful to what the Philippines have done. Why? Because at least we know that the whole world is against what China is doing. Through the award, we know that through the PCA award, we know that the whole world is actually against what China is doing, not only in Scarborough Shoal, also in what do you call that, in Spratly Islands, and also the rest of the rest of the South China Sea. At least we know that, and we can now hopefully stand together against China. But I do not know that for sure, because one thing what we need right now is to develop the code of conduct as quickly as possible, so that each nations that are claimant to the South China Sea would properly conduct themselves well in dealing with matters pertaining to the South China Sea. Okay, so I hope I have answered your question. My question is why ASEAN is so silent in dealing with these issues. I guess I've answered that because we are being very, very diplomatic. And if you look at other issues as well, for instance, Rohingya issues. Rohingyas are minorities from Myanmar, and they were not being given Myanmar's Burmese citizenship, and as a result, they were ousted from Myanmar, and most of them ran away to Bangladesh. And as you can see, that there are huge refugee camp in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, and a number of Rohingya refugees have been moved to a remote island in the Bay of Bengal by the name of Bhasan Char. Okay, so why ASEAN is so quiet on this? Because Rohingya is actually ASEAN issue. It's not even a Bangladeshi issue. It's an ASEAN issue because it is those people are from Myanmar, but Myanmar is part of ASEAN. I think the reason why is because is because of principle of non-interference. I guess principle of non-interference. We are not supposed to interfere with internal matters involving our neighbors. But now, then again, the Rohingya issues is no longer a domestic issue because, as you understand, when they are ousted, they are being removed from Myanmar. They now come all the way down to Malaysia, to Thailand, and Indonesia as refugees. So this involves other countries as well. But the reason why ASEAN is so, silent on this, because we do not want to interfere with internal affairs of Myanmar. But something has to be done, not only on the issue of Rohingya, but also on the South China Sea. But as I mentioned earlier, most leaders of Southeast Asia, most leaders of ASEAN, from my observation, they are trying to be, they are trying to exercise diplomacy in this issue. Okay, move forward, progress slowly but surely. But sometimes we may see that it's not progressing at all. But as far as South China Sea, let us look at how the leaders would come up with a declaration of and code of conduct. I hope that answers your question. ASEAN is effective, but it is actually progressing quite slowly in resolving disputes among its members. All right, and from Robert Sanders, you want to read it, Nazifa?
I will read it for you. So next question. Thank you, Prof. Next question we have from Robert Sanders. Good afternoon, Prof. Are there any shortcomings that you find in our current international instrument on maritime law that could be remedied by additional protocols or updated treaties? Also, is there a way to make our international instrument on maritime territories more climate responsive?
Oh, your Mr. Sanders' question is really challenging. I do not know how to begin. Okay, maybe I'll try to address one by one. Okay, are there any shortcomings with regards to maritime law instruments that could remedy by additional protocols or updated treaties? Okay, to me, the law of the sea. I'm referring only to the law of the sea, maybe to the law of the sea convention and certain environmental conventions. To me, the law of the sea conventions is already quite comprehensive as the main law. It's actually like the main source of law that you have to refer to with regards to ocean governance. Okay, with regards to ocean governance. So and other laws, other conventions emerge. For example, MARPOL 73, 78, and also SOLAS, Safety of Law at Sea, and then what we call that Ballast Water Convention. Those are conventions on environmental matters. Okay, so Law of the Sea Convention is the overarching convention, but it is then supplemented with other conventions as well. So to answer your questions, as far as Law of the Sea is concerned, I guess they are quite comprehensive in my point of view. They are quite comprehensive in a way that Law of the Sea conventions is supported by other conventions relating to, if we are referring to environmental issues, they are actually supported by a number of conventions relating to marine environmental protection. So if you want to find if you want to say that our laws are not remedied, actually they are. The Law of the Sea Convention cannot in any way explain everything, but they are being supported by by other conventions on environmental matters. So I suppose that as far as environmental matters is concerned, yes, they are supported. The other IMO conventions, International Maritime Organization conventions, have supported the Law of the Sea Convention. Okay, because we cannot only refer to the Law of the Sea Convention, because we can only refer to the LOSC for basic provisions. The more specific provisions, we have to refer to other IMO-related conventions with regards to environmental protection. For example, MARPOL 73, 78, COLREX, and other conventions as well. Okay. Also, is there a way to make our international instrument on maritime territories more climate responsive? Oh, maritime territories. I saw just now, I thought it was maritime terrorism. It's actually maritime territories. Okay. I'm sorry, I did not read it right there. Is there a way to make our international instrument on maritime territories more climate responsive? Yes, we actually have a number of international conventions that protects international navigation of ships, for example. If you look at MARPOL 73, 78, it has 6 annexes. The annex number 1 refers to oil, protection from oil pollution. Annex 6 refers to protection from atmospheric pollution. Annex 5 from garbage, and other annexes refer to different kind of pollution. So, if let's say Malaysia and Philippines are part of the same convention, so Philippines must make sure that whenever a ship flying Filipino flag sailing through Malaysian territorial sea must adhere to the rule that they cannot simply pollute the waters. If they have oil discharges or garbage discharges or sewage discharges, they must make sure that they keep it on board on the ship, and once it reaches port, only then it can discharge the pollutants. They cannot just simply pollute the sea by discharging all these pollutants into the sea. So if you are asking me, are there any way to make our international instruments on maritime territories more climate responsive? I think some of them already are. For example, MARPOL 73, 78. Annex 6, it prohibits ships to emit greenhouse gases when sailing through the sea. So I urge you, Mr. Sanders, to maybe refer to MARPOL 73, 78, Annex 6, particularly on prevention of pollution, on the emission of greenhouse gases from ships. So it is to ensure that navigation of ships is more environmentally friendly. Okay. From Prasa Fakhriyah Mumtaz.
Okay. Next, from Prasa Fakhriyah Mumtaz, she said that Prof. Hazmi, due to the Earth dynamic activities that could change the boundaries, what happened to the agreement by the country who already had agreement previously and the country who haven't had any agreement for the boundaries? From the law perspective, are both of the country always doing update for the agreement?
Okay, so thank you very much, Matur Nuwun Prasa Fakhriyah. Based on your name, I suppose you're from Indonesia. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. Not really interesting question. It's a question that many of my students always ask me. So it means that it's a brilliant question. Okay, so the point is that once maritime boundaries has been fixed, once maritime boundary has been fixed in a treaty, for instance, it remains so until the end of time, until it is being revised. For instance, if you look at the map that I shared with you just now with regards to Malaysia and Singapore, if you remember, the small strait that separates Malaysia and Singapore is there is a in the middle of the Strait of Johor, there is a line separating Malaysia and Singapore. This line was created through a treaty that was signed between the Sultan of Johor and the British government of Singapore in 1927. And also, and later on, when Malaysia gained independence in 1957, they also renewed the treaty by delimiting precisely the maritime boundary between Malaysia and Singapore in the Strait of Johor in 1995. So this shows clearly that between Malaysia and Singapore in the Strait of Johor, okay, you know, the very tiny strait separating the two nations, there is a maritime boundary running from west to the east. Okay, so I think I would like to share so that you have a clearer picture on how I can to see how the maritime boundary looks like. Okay, so let me show to you the map of Singapore. Okay, this is what I'm referring to, right? So if you look at this map over here, from west to the east, you can see that there is a boundary line between Malaysia and Singapore. It is drawn across the Strait of Johor. Okay, and this is the Singapore Strait. Okay, so once the maritime boundary has been drawn, maritime boundary treaty has been entered into, it remains so until forever, until it is being revised again. Okay, so if you look at this boundary over here, this Pulau Tekong is being reclaimed following the shape of the maritime boundary. It does not cross the line into Malaysia. So my point here is that once it has been drawn, once maritime boundary has been drawn, even though, let's say one day, suddenly there is a huge flood causing water level to go down here, okay, causing this place no longer to be sea, it's now part of land. Geographical or the physical change with regards to the territory. So let's say, God forbid, there is a huge wave, huge tsunami. I do not want this to happen to territories of Singapore or Malaysia, but example, there is a huge tsunami taking place here, washing all the areas, washing all the coastal areas here. And when the water recedes, this island is no longer there. This coastal area has extended beyond the maritime boundary, beyond this line. So if the maritime boundary is not being revised, the boundary remains the same. But however, has yet to sign any maritime boundary treaties, the treaty is subject to change later on. Like for example, in Pedra Branca, with regards to Malaysia and Singapore, there is no maritime boundary that has been fixed yet. So Singapore can reclaim lands as they like. Malaysia can do it too. So as time passes by and maritime boundaries has not been fixed, the maritime boundaries can later be determined through the area of land that they have reclaimed. But if maritime boundary have been fixed, even if they claim the area as they like, the area that they are claiming must follow the lines that they have determined in the Maritime Boundary Treaty. So that's why I always believe in anything nations do, the first thing that they have to do is to ensure that they have proper maritime boundary lines with their neighbors. And once this is done, there will be no future disputes in the future. Okay, so that's why I always urge for Malaysia and Singapore and also Indonesia to resolve maritime disputes, overlapping maritime disputes amongst ourselves. So I hope that has answered your question. Apa lagi soalan? Ada lagi?
Yes, we have quite a lot question.
Oh my God! Okay.
You're okay, Doctor?
Okay, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'll try to answer within 5 minutes. Okay.
All right. So next, we have a question from our committee itself, ACL Dream. He says, good evening, Associate Professor Dr. Hazmi. What is the law of the sea convention view on the baselines of an island which have reclamation of land on it? Will the law determine baselines based on the original part of island or not?
That's what I said. If the maritime boundaries have been fixed, and let's say usually it refers to the baseline refers to, there are 3 types of baseline. Okay, 3 types of baseline: normal, normal, straight, and archipelagic. If you look at Indonesia, they have determined their archipelagic baseline all across all of their islands. So let's say if they let's say a baseline have been determined, and there is what do you call that? What is the law of the sea view on the baseline which have, okay, you're talking about land reclamation. Let's say if the baseline has been determined and then you make land reclamation, okay, and your neighboring country is not too far away from you. Your neighboring country is not too far away from you. For instance, okay, like in the Strait of Malacca, Malaysia is here, Indonesia is here, and then you reclaim land. And in the middle, you have draw maritime boundary between Malaysia and Indonesia. If that is the case, I guess the land reclamation will not change anything. But just imagine you are a country in the middle of the ocean. You are a country situated. You are a country in the middle of the ocean, and you have no neighbors for thousands of kilometers. I guess if you reclaim land, your maritime entitlement might change in favor of your land reclamation. I suppose that is the way. If you are situated thousands of kilometers away from other neighbors, but if you are a country like Malaysia, like Singapore, Brunei, which is so close to your neighbors, then you have to be very wary that if you have a fix your maritime boundary line, you cannot change it as you like if the treaty has been entered into. Because under international law, once a treaty is signed, Article 26 of the Vienna Convention mentions clearly that treaties must be upheld in good faith, right? Okay, so that is Pacta San Servanda. So treaty must be upheld in good faith, including treaty involving maritime boundaries. Okay, now let's look at Nadia Turjan. Okay, mana lagi ni?
Nadia Turjana asks, she would like to ask your opinion, your point of view, and your hope regarding the maritime law in future.
Okay, maritime law, I mean both law of the sea and maritime law. Okay, I suppose that if you I wish all my students would take up this subject, so that when you become negotiator for your government in the future, you will negotiate for the betterment of your for the betterment of your nation, regardless if you're Malaysian, Indonesian, or Filipino, or any other nationalities. So my view is that it's time for us to study this subject to make this particular subject matter, field of law, is not too Western centric. It's also time to make it more Asian centric, something like that. If there are more scholars in this field, particularly from Southeast Asia, this will be good for us, okay, for in the future. That's my hope on this topic. Okay, Shamsul Yusuf. Salam Prof, in your opinion, does US freedom navigation operation is still necessary to provide balance of power? Intervention or for not will just escalate maritime dispute in South China Sea. My own opinion, the exercise of freedom of navigation operations in South China Sea is just a way to show to the world that South China Sea does not belong in entirety to China. So as far as this is concerned, I'm in support of for now, but not to the extent of allowing extraterrestrial power to intrude into our internal matters within this region. But as far as to show to the world that South China Sea does not belong to China, I have no problem with regards to the exercise of FONOP in the South China Sea. And lastly, is this the last question? Salam and good afternoon.
I guess the question it has
the
the same sender. Zuidrina. However, the correct questions she sent to me is Salam and good afternoon, Prof. In regards of the UNCLOS, since it is the main governing law for maritime and borders matters, my question is that whether the sovereignty to resolve issues over such matter is still dominant within the state government itself or upon the UN itself.
Oh, okay.
In case where such issue involves breach of agreements between the states. Okay,
so the maritime disputes is actually issues between the two nations. I don't think it involves UN. UN is just UN is an organization where all states are state party to it. But as far as resolving maritime disputes are concerned, it is the treaty between the two states. For example, if there is a maritime boundary disputes between Australia and Indonesia, it will be between these two nations. So I don't think UN has a role in it. It's more on what UNCLOS is doing. Is UNCLOS say that this is how you should resolve their maritime dispute, equidistant principle and whatnot. But in order to ensure that the Maritime Boundaries Treaty has been entered into, it is between the states involved. For example, with Pedra Branca, it's between Malaysia and Singapore. The UN will not interfere until and unless we want ICJ or any other UN mechanism to settle the disputes for us. For example, with regards to Pedra Branca and Sipat Likitan, we actually went to the ICJ to get the problem resolved. But as far as determining the boundaries are concerned, the treaty is between the nations, the nations that are involved in the disputes. Okay, all right.
All right, Prof.
Okay.
So thank you. We have another two questions, and since we are running out of time, I will consider the last question is from Taufik Rashman. So we go to the second last question first from Arif Hanafi. He said, Salam Prof.
Artikel sangat cantik macam monyet.
Kali tu, lapar tak mata ni. Kakak ke tak?
Your mic. Okay. Salam Prof. Article 121 of the LOSC also define an island as one which sustain human habitation or economic life. As we can see, Pedra Branca, which claimed by Singapore, in fact can sustain human habitation due to the existence of quarters and the lighthouse. My question, on what aspect denying Pedra Branca as an island could lead ICJ or tribunal to side with denying states?
Okay, so based on what has been mentioned in Article 1, is quite a tough question, I would say. Article 121 states clearly that a rock which cannot sustain human habitation or economic life in its own will not have, will only can it sustain human habitation on its own? That's number one. If we compare to island like Bali, the island of Bali, okay, do we need to have a lighthouse in Bali to make Bali habitable? Not exactly. Bali is an island and it's habitable with or without a lighthouse. The same goes with Langkawi or Penang. Okay, so with regards to Pedra Branca, if the lighthouse is not there, will it be able to be inhabited by humans? So, in my opinion, if we want to look at whether or not the island is the island or rock can support human habitation, we have to look at the natural form of the island or the rock in the first place. So islands like Langkawi, Bali or Penang, or islands like Luzon, Mindanao, these are islands. These are real islands that can support human habitation. But to me, Pedra Branca is just a mere rock, and the reason why humans can live there is because of the existence of the lighthouse. Okay, so I think that's the way. I don't think if we would want to bring this case to the ICJ anymore, because bringing case to ICJ is quite expensive. So I guess what we can do right now is to negotiate with Singapore and try to get this maritime boundary fixed as soon as possible. Because if we do not get this fixed soon, then these issues like the status of Pedra Branca will crop up in the future. And it will also allow other disputes to emerge, like, for example, overlapping maritime disputes, not only on territorial sea, but EEZ and continental shelf as well. So if you ask me, I believe Pedra Branca is actually a maritime rock. It's not an island. Okay, the final question is, Oh my God, this is a very long question. Okay.
Okay, so last question from Taufik Rashman Nugraha. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Hazmi. I would like to ask if one country has drawn the new maritime boundaries in EEZ and continental shelf, would it have any impact to underwater cultural heritage? Since UCH still in grey area in the EEZ and CS because UCH is not fell under sovereign right, except under several circumstances. For example, the UCH has been coral living area. Would it raising new dispute?
This is a very difficult question because I have no answer to it. Oh, by the way, welcome salam Taufik. I'm not really familiar with underwater cultural heritage, but I believe that if the EEZ or the continental shelf belongs to this to a certain coastal states, they are actually under the obligation to protect the marine environment of that particular area, even in high seas. You know, Article 90, if I'm not mistaken, or is it Article 88? High seas have to be reserved for peaceful purposes. When you mention peaceful purposes, it means that it cannot be done. It cannot be used for purposes that can damage the environment of the maritime area. So I assume, I believe that, I'm not really sure about underwater cultural heritage, but it's a responsibility of the coastal state to take care of its area within its sovereign rights and also within its sovereignty. I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof, for answering all the questions. Now we have ended session within few blinks. It's so fast, but the insight and knowledge that I've gotten, countless. In order to value our distinguished speakers' precious contribution today, we would like to display an e-certificate for Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Hazmi bin Mohd Rusli. Thank you, Prof, for your contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to capture this wonderful moment into our memories, we would like to invite the honorable speaker to have a virtual photo session together. The audience may turn on the camera.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. We meet again. Everyone can open your camera. Maybe a few minutes. All right, I will count by 1, 2, 3, smile, and then you guys can do whatever you want to do. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3, smile. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, the last one. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Prof. Hazmi.
Thank you, Hazmi.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Pak Andi. Thank you, ACL Dream Team.
Thank you, everyone.
I'll see you tomorrow on Dr. Lowell's presentation. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much to our honorable speaker for being the biggest part of our session today. We really appreciate your time, valuable contribution, and especially your precious knowledge. We would like to extend our warm gratitude to all the participants for today's session. We hope that you have gained as much input as possible. So on behalf of the International Law Unit USIM, in collaboration with Universitas Gadjah Mada, I hope that you enjoyed the talk and I look forward to your participation in our upcoming sessions. A gentle reminder for the audiences, we will have another session tomorrow on 22nd August 2021 in the morning on the archipelagic states presented by Dr. Luwel Bautista from the University of Wollongong in Australia. And in the evening, Mr. Danipogo Loksono of UGM Indonesia will deliver a presentation on geospatial technology for border management. Don't miss out. Thank you, and don't forget to always wear your mask and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. Terima kasih semua.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Doctor.
Terima kasih.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Doctor.
Hasmi, thank you, Hasmi.
Thank you, Andy. Bye.